Boy, do I want a horn to work in my car. Right to the point where I dug into all this again. If you can see, at one point I got in here and cleaned all this up pretty nice. Nice fresh lithium grease and stuff. But, you know, I went as far as taking this off, and that was about where I stopped. But today, I'm trying to figure this thing out. And, well, the short story is, without the body ground or chassis ground or whatever here touching anything else and just being out in the open there, this wire right here is delivering a ground signal, which if I were to try to hook up a horn would mean that I would constantly be honking. And I don't know why it's getting a ground all the time. So decided to tear in a little bit further, and while I'm at it, let's go ahead and clean this nasty old grease off and put some nice fresh new grease in there. We'll start by putting it back together and seeing if it suddenly works better, but who knows, we'll see. Okay, so it looks like my first theory was correct. Basically hooked my battery back up and clipped onto the feed, the constant 12 volt, and you know, check the center here, and sure enough, you know, it's grounded. And if I push this back on enough where it's making contact with that, then yeah, I'm getting ground over here too. As soon as I pull it out here where it's not touching anymore, ground goes away. So it's definitely because of the contact with this that I'm getting a ground. So is that not supposed to be grounded? I expect not. Otherwise you'd think they would use that in the design instead of having a separate wire run up it. So I guess I need to figure out why this is grounding and stop that, I think. So with no small effort, I've got everything back together, and still no horn. We'll work on that later, but I've got the makings of a working horn with only 2 of the 3 screws, or excuse me, 2 of the 3 springs installed. And I pulled this little beauty out of some parts in my Gia. And so we'll go ahead and pop that dude in there, and let's see. Yeah, that's looking a little more like it should. Yes, it's broken, but you know, hey, I'll get over it. I'll get a better one later. It's been a little while now, but I'm taking one more step toward having a horn. So this thing conducts, this thing does not. This is for a Suzuki, and it won't look perfect, and it's probably not perfect, but the holes basically line up. So I'm going to throw this in place of this up in here. A whole lot of sweating later and a few bad words, and it's in. And the hardest part was getting the bare wire connected up underneath the nut, but it's done. All right, so I have pulled this wire loose from the steering disc, and this is the wire that feeds the ground signal from essentially the steering box down below up to the feed ground wire up the steering shaft and to the horn button that ultimately, when you push the horn, will complete the circuit. And so I have pulled this loose to test and verify with my test lamp that is hooked up to the brown wire, which is my horn wire, my horn ground wire. Oh, it's kind of tight here. And when I touch my constant hot, no light. Okay. And now I have it hooked back up. And we'll do the same test again. And there's that light. So that tells me that that wire right there is connecting along the shaft and grounding out that whole shaft. And this is based on stuff that I've done in the past to troubleshoot all of this, knowing that yeah, if that whole shaft is grounded, then basically it just delivers constant ground down that brown wire. So I just need to pull that wire out and replace it, and I think we'll be in action, ready for a horn. Other than the fact that no big surprise that that wire has breaks in it. Why? Because, well, if you look at this wire, that's not great. And then, you know, okay, the ground wire is doing that. Well, I mean, that, you know, could be a problem. You know, it might hit something and you know, activate your horn when you don't want it to. But what's even worse is, oh yeah, shoot, my positive 12 volts is also just tattered. So this all needs to be replaced, really. But now I at least know that I can have a working horn once I replace some wiring. So that is the wire that would normally be connected to the steering disc, which would take the ground signal coming from the steering box, go around the steering disc and up the center of the steering column. As you can see, it is disconnected and not able to deliver a ground. And here's the other end of it, right here. And yet, steering column is very well grounded, including this spot right here. And this is the wire which delivers the ground signal when the horn button is pressed down to the actual horn to activate the horn. So the fact that it's grounded all the time is kind of a bad thing. So it's time to figure out why it's grounded and stop it. Now I've just removed the two bolts opposite one another, the ones that connect the steering box to the coupler, leaving the bolts connected to the steering shaft. So we'll see if we're still getting a ground up there. And indeed we are. Alright, so this is a slightly different view to show that the steering box connection is completely disconnected and not touching the steering shaft. And I'm just now realizing I am also going to have to make sure that it's not touching the body up above, and I think it probably currently is, so I'll have to slip something in between there before I test. That should do it. Well, would you look at that? Nada. No more ground. Okay, let's put it back together bit by bit. The only thing touching between the two assemblies is the steering disc to the steering box connector via a bolt. Let's see if we're getting ground from that alone. Still nothing. All right, I'm about to go in for another test, and I think I know the answer to this next one. As I'm putting this together, I'm realizing I think that this ground strap, the way that it is designed to work, is not correct. I'm thinking that this ground strap instead of jumping across and intentionally making a contact between the steering box connection and the steering shaft connection, is very intentionally grounding the entire steering column, or steering shaft. And of course it's lighting up. So there's, it seems to not be entirely clearly defined by, you know, the online community. Yeah, sure enough, we're jumping across. So maybe there is supposed to be something that keeps separation between the ground that is in this steering shaft from connecting out to this outer column, a buffer, if you will, in between, you know, the bearing and this outside shaft here. Clearly there isn't in my case, but if this was supposed to be grounded all the time in this scenario, why would we even send a wire all the way up the center of it? Why would we have a rubber plug that the wire is supposed to go through the center of it that sticks right down into this hole to keep that wire from touching this shaft if this was supposed to be grounded all along? Why wouldn't we just use this ground signal up here instead of going to all the bother of running a wire up if this is just going to be grounded anyway? So I think I might have my answer, and I'm going to test it. I just need to find a means of connecting the wire that goes through the shaft to the other side of the steering coupler and avoiding connecting it across the way it is down there now. So this is not completely put back together. I still need to remove the ground wire that used to jump across from this other side here. It is loose at the other end of it. That wire there. But this new wire is just jumping right across. And so let's see what this looks like up there. Moment of truth. All right, so now as long as I'm correct about the idea that this is the way it should work, when I put this all back together, we should be good. Little interim proof of concept here. Horn doesn't sound so great. I might need to do a little more work on it, but we're getting there. And then I'll wind up slipping this clip in once I've pushed this back far enough. Seal it in place. So I've got my little star washers down in their holes. And I've got this completely pre-assembled with the springs in place. And now I'm basically just going to hope that my efforts to video this while I'm doing it don't go horribly wrong. Basically just set this thing in place, line up my springs, and it's already working against me for sure, but get that into place, and I'll start screwing just a little bit on one screw and then work my way around getting each spring in place. So now that I have that in place, I'm going to take a look at my spacing, and it seems like that side's a little closer in than that side, so I will just loosen this screw a little bit once and I'll just keep checking it until I feel like it's right, possibly adjusting any of the screws around until I like it. All right, with everything still failing, I decided this this may be my issue. So the, you know, contact ring on the back of the, oh, I don't even remember what this thing's called. The horn button, whatever, assembly. This you know, copper piece or whatever that's on the back of here, I knew it needed to make contact. And I was trying to figure out what it needed to make contact with, and I've decided that it's this ring right here. It is a metal ring, hard to tell on my car, and so I've started taking some sandpaper and just going after, you know, primarily the top of this ring, and you can kind of see where I've already brightened up right in here. I haven't worked on any of this stuff over here. I mean, it looks black. You can barely tell it's there. So I'm going to clean that up real good and hope that this is my last problem. All right, well, I'm still not 100% pleased with it because I can't just do that or that. But if I get on both sides, or maybe more right in here, it's a real particular connection it needs to make. There's some more work to be done in here, but so I did wind up having to pull my bumper off in order to get this bolt through. But you can see I have a right side mounted and a left side mounted horn. And my next course of action will be to tuck these back inside, hook them up to a relay, and then feed both of these horns from a relay. Starting to wind down a little bit. I've put heat shrink in places where I feel it's important. And so I'm taking my constant 12 volt feed and hitting pin 30 and 86 on this relay. My horn ground, which activates when you push the horn button, is going to 85, and 87 here will be connected to this end right here. Once I push it back through, this will connect to this horn here on the left side of the car. And I have routed this wiring back behind the bumper, brought it over to the right-hand horn. Each horn has a ground. It just grounds to its mounting bolt. And this should work. Well, I had a little bit of a false start yesterday. Got these two horns installed, hit the button, didn't really hear two distinct sounds, and but one was working, and then this morning it stopped working. And then later it kind of worked again. So I said, you know, I don't know if I've got a good ground. And that was exactly the problem. Now I have a ground in a different location for each of them. And once this car goes by, you'll be able to hear two distinct horn sounds. Very exciting. Exciting to a simpleton like me anyway. So initially I decided, oh yeah, it'll totally work to just ground right off of this because, you know, conductive metal, connected to conductive metal, kind of rusty, but I did clean it up some. So I've gone all the way up to this bolt that connects the bumper through and holds the bracket to the bumper. And that seems to be making all the difference. So, hooray, dual horns. That's it. The only thing left to do is to try to clean up my connection surface in the ring inside of the steering wheel here, in the base of the steering wheel here. I think we can agree that this seat frame is probably not something that we want to reuse. Some of the springs are absolutely fine, but these tabs, well, they just make the most excellent replacement for the clamp that I'm missing under my steering wheel. So there we are with the final product, all assembled and working. I'm not especially happy with the clip because it's not correct, but it seems to be working. So one last little thing there, and I'm satisfied. Calling this done. It's been many months coming. So in conclusion, for me, it all came down to two things, which was the ground strap that was intentionally routing around and connecting the steering box to the steering shaft, which should not be there, and cleaning and brightening up the ring in the steering wheel underneath the horn button ring. And those two things are what ultimately fixed the lack of a working horn.